You're listening to Grown and Growing with Sonia Hamlin. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here because I got a question for y'all. I want you to think back to when you were young, when you were a little kid growing up. Who taught you about sex? Yeah, I'm coming in hot with the questions this episode. I really want to know, who taught you about sex? Was it your parents? Did your parents sit you down and tell you about the birds and the bees? Did you learn about it from your friends or on your own because y'all stumbled on some dirty magazines? Or did you learn about it in school where your teachers taught you about the biology of your body and showed you pictures of sexually transmitted diseases? How did you learn about sex? Now, I want you to think in the present, or maybe in the past for some of you, depending on how old your kids were. Did you take that same approach with your kids, or did you try something different? How did you prepare your kids to think about sex or to think about their bodies? How did you have that conversation with them? I know that's something I'm going through right now as a parent of an 11 and 12-year-old. The conversations are ripe to be had. I'm right in the thick of it. And I've had some conversations with them about their body and how it changes and what they can expect, and even about sex and what it is and why people do it. But I feel like I could do a much better job in having that conversation and preparing them to become the responsible adults that I want them to be. So to that end, I have Dr. Lexx Brown-James on the podcast, and she is a sex therapist and sexuality educator who teaches about sex-positive parenting as well as shame-free education. And we'll get into exactly what that means. But I wanted to have her on the podcast because I needed her help, because I know there are so many things that I need to teach my kids about this world, the world that they're coming into, just how to know their own bodies, right? And the benefits that come from knowing the pleasure and the pain that comes from sex and sexuality, but also how do I better protect them? And what do I mean by protection? I feel like if you have this conversation in a strategic way, you have the opportunity to protect them potentially for a lifetime. This conversation can help keep them safe, right? Girls and boys alike, keep them out of situations that could potentially harm them. It could help lessen their curiosity about sex so they're not going out trying to figure out things by themselves or on the internet. It can lessen their insecurities or boost their confidence when it comes to their bodies, right? We can't do it all, but we can help. And then finally, it can build trust between you and your child. So that's why this conversation with Dr. Lexx is so important. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Dr. Lexx, and then we will get into this episode. Dr. Lexx Brown-James is a phenomenal sex therapist and sexuality educator who created the Institute for Sexuality and Intimacy, LLC, where she features her education skills, therapy services, keynotes, research, and sex positivity training for caregivers. She has a best-selling children's book entitled, These Are My Eyes, This Is My Nose, This Is My Vulva, These Are My Toes, that is also featured in a curriculum for kindergartners and first graders in the New York City School District. Dr. Lexx also serves on the board of the American Association for Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, and is primed to be the first Black woman president of the organization in 2024. She has been featured on podcasts like NPR, Scary Mommy, Therapy for Black Girls, and New York Pix 11 News. Her column, Better Sex with Dr. Lexx, for She Knows, has been picked up numerous times by Yahoo.com and other news outlets. Dr. Lexx has been featured in articles from Mind Body Green, Essence Magazine, BuzzFeed, and the American Journal of Family Physicians. So without further ado, let's get into this topic. Welcome, Dr. Lexx and baby. What's baby's name? I'm like...
Baby is Escanor.
Escanor. Welcome, baby Escanor. This is my first baby on the podcast, so I'm excited.
Thank you for being so flexible. You're making a debut, Tubbas.
We can't see his cute face. I'm like, it's like the microphone is, oh, he is so cute. He's like, let's hurry up, lady, and get this over with so I can get back to my life.
Right, right.
So I'm glad to have you on the podcast because there's this topic around teaching kids about, sex positivity and learning about shame-free sex ed is so important to me. And because I have two little ones, an 11 and 12-year-old, that, yes, an 11 and 12-year-old that I'm like trying to do things a little bit differently that were done for me. So before we get into the topic, I want to ask you about like what led you to this work. So you're a trained sex therapist, an educator, a relationship coach, and I'm so much more, I'm sure. But what led you to do this work?
That's absolutely it. So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and a PhD level sexologist, right? And I'm also from College Park, Atlanta, Georgia. I'm a recovering Baptist.
All right. Okay.
Right from the South. If you've ever heard a rap song out of Georgia, they talk about College Park. That is where I am from. So all of those things to say that it's just something we needed, right? So Black bodies are so policed. And growing up, I had the privilege of having a 2-parent household. So many of my friends didn't. And then going to college, so many people didn't. And I realized that being able to see Black love flourish and not struggle was really a gift that so many people didn't have. And so when we talk about shame-free sex ed for parenting, it's because so many of us didn't have that conversation. We didn't have that model. And I wanted to be able to show that we have a model. We can exist and not have struggle love and be successful.
Struggle love. And I grew up in a 2-parent household, but I'm still not sure I am getting the example of love that I needed, even though I did grow up with both of my parents in the household. So it's really important work that you're doing. And when I was thinking about this conversation, I was like, do we start with shame-free or do we start with sex positivity? Going back and forth in my head because I'm like, shame-free is so important. And I also think that involves like the parents, right? Like how do you define what shame-free is?
Right. So actually, I think they go hand in hand. I don't see them on a spectrum, right?
Okay.
So being a sex positive parent means that we are trying to raise the next generation without the sexual shame that was passed to us. It's in us. We have it. It's how our elders were taught. It's the best tools that they had. And we don't want to pass it on to our kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're healing. But to be shame-free means I'm not going to make you feel unlovable and so bad or less valuable because you want to know about information regarding sexuality. And what happens is people only stop at sex. They only think about penetrative intercourse and specifically penis and vagina intercourse. They don't think about sexuality in a whole. They don't think about how a person is presenting themselves to the world. They don't think about who people are actually attracted to. They don't think about building intimate, significant relationships that are non-romantic and romantic. They only think about intercourse. And sexuality is so much more than just intercourse.
Yeah, absolutely. And we grew up in a world that is so weird because it's over-sexualized in one aspect, and then we don't talk about sex in another aspect. So you never really learn about it, but it's always in your face. And so you really never develop. And I'm also I was raised Baptist, went to Baptist church, so I know that as well. And I was thinking about the shame-free part when it came to me being a parent and me being comfortable with having these very, intimate conversations with my kids. And it's not even here are your body parts, because I feel like that. To me, I feel like that's the easier part to like teach them about their body parts.
I'm glad.
Is it not easy?
I think it's easy, but some people don't. You also have to remember, most people didn't grow up with names of body parts. Right. So we have grown men who don't know that a vaginal canal is different from a urethra, which is different from an anus, right?
Yes.
They think everything comes out of one hole. I mean, probably grown women too. It's just grown people. right?
Grown people, yes.
We have grown people who don't know that, who don't know that, like, there's, you know, two testes in the scrotum, and there's a tube that leads from the scrotum, and one is for sperm, but, you know, there's also another tube that goes to the, people don't know these things. So they're like,
right.
What? We still have people that don't think that a clitoris is real. So like, or the clitoris is like the devil's doorknob, right? Or doorbell. Like,
I've never heard that one.
That's
yeah,
crazy. Once it's rung, it can't be unrung.
I mean, if you're lucky. No, I'm just kidding.
No, but exactly, right? So like, we still have people who think these things,
yeah,
and think that they're so bad and so innately evil. So my good friend Brittany Broda Smith runs the intimacy firm, and she's a Christian sexologist, and she talks about, like, God created your clitoris. Ooh. If you believe all things came from God and you were made in God's image, God created your clitoris. God gave the penis thousands and thousands of nerve endings to feel good. Why would we demonize these things that were gifted by God that you love so much?
That's interesting. I wonder it almost sounds like a oxymoron in the way that, you know, we've been raised to think about Christianity. I mean, not only was I raised Baptist, but I also went to a Christian school, and then I went to a Catholic school. So I was all in it. I mean,
so you got full of the shame, right? And that was the thing. That was the tool. If I make them feel bad about it, if I make them feel dirty, they won't want to do it.
Yeah. And the thing about that is, it's like, it may prevent you from doing stuff, but when you're older and you're ready, that part of your brain doesn't shut off easily. Like, you can't just, you just can't be like, oh.
Even if you're older, when you hit puberty, people forget that when kids hit puberty, their bodies aren't the only thing that's growing, right? It's also their minds. They have the same hormones that adults do. That same horny feeling you get the week before your period is the same horny feeling that this 13-year-old is getting, this 14-year-old is getting. Some kids as early as 8 and 9, because their hormones are raging. But now the front of their brain, their prefrontal cortex, if you want to get super technical, it doesn't mature until people are 27. And if you were older than 27, you remember having a thought like, I would do this differently if I was younger. And I'm so glad I have more sense.
For sure.
Right.
And it's so funny that your brain develops so late into your, I mean, what we would consider late, because think about how many decisions you've made between 18 and 27. Right. How many decisions you've made without having the full function of your brain.
Exactly. And so I read something from I think that was Nedra Sawab. It was like 36 is actually midlife, not 50. 36 is midlife, because you think about people like die in their 70s.
That's true. Yeah.
So 36 is midlife. So you're making these decisions,
right?
Pretty considered like late in some of that, closer to midlife. But at that point, at teenagers' points, like, the part of the brain that says this is fun is bigger than this makes sense.
Right.
So they're gonna do the thing that feels fun. And when we talk about shaming folks, they learn how to hide it better. They're like, I'm gonna get in trouble with this.
How do you do that as a parent? Like, how do you, knowing that their frontal lobe isn't fully developed, how do you teach them about sex and all about sex and sexuality and the pleasure that you get from it, but also not, knowing that they don't have the mental capacity to think through all of the emotional things that come with sex? How do you balance the two?
Oh, that's such a smart question, right? There are levels to this ish, y'all. Like, it's not just one conversation. You know this.
Okay.
Like, I tell parents all the time, if you taught your kids how to wipe properly, you are being sex positive in parenting.
Okay.
If you tell your kids they're beautiful, you're doing sex positive parenting.
Okay, that's good.
Especially for Black folks, right? If you've told your child that this is a boundary, and you don't consent to something, or that person didn't consent to something, you're doing sex positive parenting. If you told them that they have a right to say no, that's parenting in a sex positive way. So we're always having these conversations, and these conversations, again, there are levels, they build. So do I talk to my kids about sexual pleasure? No, my kids are 4 and 6 and 7 months. It doesn't make sense to them. You know what does make sense? If they go poop and it hurts, and their bodies are in pain, then I say, okay, it sounds like your body's in pain when you went to the bathroom, and looks like we need to incorporate more green veggies. Right? We talk about pleasure in their body. It feels really good to laugh. It feels really good to do surprises. Secrets don't really feel good for our bodies, do they? So we're talking about the idea about our bodies being in pleasure. Right, which is something your body is supposed to feel. It's supposed to feel pleasurable. We're not supposed to be doing things that put us in pain all the time.
And it's interesting because I've never made those connections. I've never connected that part of it, that part of how we're teaching them and how we're teaching them about their bodies and how we're teaching them about what feels good and what doesn't feel good. I've never connected that to sex positive parenting at all. So I'm glad you made that connection, because it makes me not feel as long.
Right.
It's as behind.
Sensuality is a part of sexuality.
Right.
Learning how to trust our parents. And so I remember I was walking somewhere and my oldest daughter told me no about something. And an older Black man stepped up. He was like, "You won't let her tell you no like that?" And I looked him dead in his eye, like, yes, because if she tells me no, she's damn sure going to tell you no. Yes, because she feels safe with me. And if we let them practice with us where they feel safe, where they won't be harmed, baby, when I let this girl out in the world, right, nothing's going to be able to stop her or turn her down. Right. Because she knows what her boundaries are. And she knows that people who love her don't cross her boundaries.
Yeah. And so that's interesting. Yeah, I love that, because my daughter is so fiery, and she's always been opinionated. She's always stated exactly what she wants. She goes after exactly what she wants. And I've never wanted to squish that in her. Like, I never wanted to, I'm like, I want to shape it. I want to mold it. She needs to keep that, because she is going to need that in the world. And so many times, I don't allow people to call her bad or fast, or she's being grown. I'm like, oh.
Fast. I was called fast when I was a kid because I was bigger than all the other kids, right? I just grew faster. And everybody assumed we were having sex, and that happens to Black and brown kids, right? Across all genders. Black and brown kids are considered sexual as soon as they hit puberty. And for, again, some of us, that's 8, 9, 10 years old. Yeah. And people are considering us either having sex or ready for sex and having access to us in sexual ways, because we've been taught to be Black is to be sexual, which comes from, like, white colonizers on the edge of the coast of Africa when they saw bare-breasted Black people and were like, oh my God, we're turned on. They must be so sexy and wanting sex because we're turned on. Right. No, we're existing. We're just existing in our bodies, but our bodies have been so sexualized. And I think that's another reason we came from such high amounts of shame. Right. Right. Because we're so sexualized by others, we have to prove ourselves to be super prudish, super non-sexual in order to try and garner safety. Right. And that doesn't work. We know respectability politics will never save us. No. Oh, it's so interesting how, just in the few podcasts I just did, one was all about like health and how do you take care of yourself, and all roads always lead back to racism. Like, every conversation, all roads lead back to racism being weaved into every part of our existence, which is crazy to me. So how do, for parents who may look at, because obviously I'm 45, one of those people, like I told you, grew up Baptist. My friends are very similar to me. How do you reconcile, like, trying to teach sex positivity, but also, or people who link sex positivity to promiscuity? Like, how do you reconcile those two things? I know they're inherently not connected, but some people think they are. No, that's, so girl, absolutely. Right. One, I don't think that there's such a thing as promiscuity, right? Okay. People use sex in different ways, and it's really about how they're qualifying sex, because we still have that slut versus stud idea. So for women, if they sleep with too many people, their value is diminished. But for men, if they sleep with a lot of people, their value increases. Why? No, that's crap. The thing I want parents to do is, do you want your child to learn about sexuality the way that you did? Right. Do you want them to learn about all of the things in the world the way you did?
Mm-hmm.
Or would you rather them learn from your wisdom? Right. The other piece of that also comes into when we're teaching about sexuality-based facts. CDC says, research says, the longer kids are waiting, like, wait, no, that doesn't make sense. The more kids know, the longer they wait. So the more information they have, the longer they actually wait to engage in intercourse.
That's interesting.
And they're safer when they do
so
it.
Why do we have, where's this, all this abstinence only? Like abstinence only comes from, and I mean, obviously we've seen the results of abstinence only because, you know, we live in this world, and you can
now
see
Texas has one of the highest rates of unintended pregnancies amongst teens, right? Because they did away with all of their Planned Parenthood educational systems, as well as only instituted abstinence only. And our country, just quick facts, 19 states are required to give medically accurate sexual information and curriculum. 19. And out of that, I think 17 do. So the more kids know, the longer they wait, and the more safe they're going to be. So they're going to either use a barrier method or some type of birth control, right, to try and prevent unintended pregnancies. And so abstinence only came from this idea that kids, quote unquote, can't make these decisions. And yet these are the same kids that they recruit to be in our military.
War. Yeah.
To vote, right? These are the same children. These are the same children that people are trusting to, you know, be the quote unquote man of the household.
Right.
So there's this constant contradiction, or to raise, you know, their siblings, of stay in a child's place, but they're expecting adult behavior from them. And we're ill-equipping our kids. And actually, when we look at 20-year-olds, sex has actually gone down. Like intercourse has actually decreased among who we would think is having the most sex. It's actually decreased. They're not actually having partnered sex as much as we were when we were kids. And
why do you think that is? Why do you think there's a decrease?
One, I think that people are more aware, right? So they have more education, and they're like, okay, I don't have all my stuff together. I don't know my status. I don't know if I found anybody. Two, we've increased masturbation education. Masturbation is, outside of abstinence, the safest form of sexual intercourse and play, right? There are all sorts of devices. There's all sorts of ways to masturbate. If we can encourage masturbation, it also teaches people what's pleasurable for them.
Right.
Because too many women, specifically women in our generation and above, suffered through sex. I think of The Color Purple. It don't feel like Mr. using the bathroom on you. Why are we doing something where it feels like somebody is using the bathroom on us?
Right.
It does not have to be that way. But we were taught that you were just supposed to make your partner happy and be a tool for their pleasure. And we're no longer passing that rhetoric down.
Right.
You get to be a whole person. If this is something you're going to enjoy, I want you to be able to enjoy it fully. You have that right.
Well, that's promising. That's promising. So I want to go back to one thing you said, which is around safety, and teaching kids about sex and sexuality in an open, shame-free way leads to them being safe. Can you talk more about that? Because I think it's safety on so many different, like when you said it, I'm like, oh my gosh, safety on so many different levels.
Oh, let's talk about it. So at my kids' age, right? So my kids, one of their first 5 words was vulva. One of their first 5 words. My lover teasing me about it. He said we can't go a day in the house without saying vulva, and he's pretty much right. Whatever.
It's kind of a fun word.
He knew who he married. That being said, so teaching kid proper names and terms, everybody always says, oh, so they can report if something happens. No, my goal is prevention, right? You cannot shame my children into a behavior that you're going to be able to take advantage of them. Being able to talk to your kids and have them say penis, vulva, anus, nipples, mouth, right? These are all private spaces. Nobody has access to these private spaces outside of a doctor, parent, grandma, whoever you all deem. And it is a prevention towards minor attracted people. Because if they know that your child is talking to someone about sex and sexuality, it is harder for them to be like, well, you just said this dirty word. I'm going to tell your mom that you said this word if you don't send me a picture or do whatever. Right? They're gonna be like, my mama say this word all the time. So you can tell her. Matter of fact, I'm gonna tell her because you're not supposed to be talking about this, right? And so continuing on with protection, it also means consent. So if I hear that my kid comes home talking about a choo-choo and they mean their penis or an egg roll, I'm like, who you been talking to about private parts?
Right.
So yellow flag, right? Is this your friends? Is this, another adult? Is this an older child or the babysitter? I have questions. Right. When we're getting even older, so like 8, 9, 10, 11, we're going to talk about boundaries, right? Who are your friends? Are they crossing your boundaries physically? Meaning, are they trying to pop your bra? Are they trying to look down your pants? Are they like seeing, we know the first onset of seeing pornography is around age 11 now. So have they seen something, right? Have they seen naked people on a screen? Was it interesting? Did they want to watch it? Were they trying to hide it? And so as we're continuing to talk about, like, Mom, I saw a vulva on a screen. Red flag. What? Tell me more. So I'm not going to be like, what do you mean? Show me that. Who saw it? Like, I'm not going to attack the kid because the kid isn't going to want to tell you anything. You get curious instead. But now I know.
The way in my mind, I'm like, yeah, the way you're saying the questions, I'm like, that is how we're supposed to be curious about when they come back to us with things. But I think, I think so many
your
things.
Your knee jerk is to go into protection mode, right? And that protection mode for us can look like animosity to them.
Okay.
And that animosity is scary because now they think they're in trouble. Right. And now it doesn't feel safe to tell you more information.
Yeah.
Right. And your goal is, how do I increase safety? And you're going to talk about, so it looks like what you saw was this thing called pornography. It's only for entertainment purposes, but it's naked people on a screen. I don't think your brain is yet ready to really handle that type of information. So if you see it, I'd like you to turn the screen off and come and let me know.
Right.
Right. Because these things can be harmful for you. And I don't want you to be harmed. I don't want you unsafe. And then as they get more access to media, we're going to talk about media safety. But all of this is, if somebody slides into your DMs and you're 13 with an Instagram account and it's newly minted, right?
Yes.
You're like, oh, that's so exciting. I got a DM. Is it my friend? No, it's this grown man talking about relationships. Then we know that that's unsafe. So all of that starts from these beginning conversations of, you can talk to me about your penis, a vulva, an anus. You can ask me about fat people. You can talk to me about discharge or random erections, because you're keeping that conversation open. And if you don't know an answer as a parent, you say that. I don't know the answer for you right now, baby, but I will go find out and figure out a way to tell you it in a way that you can understand. And you do that.
So what if you haven't done that? So what if you haven't been that open with your child, and maybe they're like, we'll take me, for example, my kids are preteens and I haven't been talking to them about sex or their bodies or, what they're seeing at school. How do I do that? I mean, communication between adults is hard. Communication with your kid about something that you have your own feelings about. How do you propose doing that, or where do you start with that kind of conversation?
So I think it's such a great place because there's such a frontier where you can find out what they know and what they're inquisitive about. I'm like, all right, you know what? You're the big 11 now. You're 12, you're preteens, you're about to be teens, right? You've probably noticed your friends' bodies are changing, your body is changing. What questions do you have?
Right.
And so, like, admittedly, my kids have seen me naked and they're like, Mom, there's hair here, here, here. And I'm like, yeah, one day you'll probably have hair there too. We're not hairy as a family, but some people are. Right?
Yeah.
And they're so excited. They're like, that means I'm growing up. And I'm like, yeah, it does. So that means you're going to have to, make really good decisions. And that's where we leave it for us. For you all, it's, what are you noticing in your friends? What's different? But also remembering for puberty, and I can't stress this enough because I love teenagers. Their brains are changing too. People forget their bodies are changing, but their brains are changing too. There's going to be some times they are just downright pissed off and they don't know why.
They have no idea.
No, they don't know. They're just fuming. And you're like, yo, we're going to have some consequences. But instead it's like, you need some time. What's going on? Right? And they're not going to know. And their brain is going to say, be disrespectful and test boundaries. And we want to do a corrective response, because you will not be one of these teenagers out here disrespecting me.
Right.
And their brains are literally changing and undergoing so much change. So they just need some grace. Like,
I know you said you love teenagers, but they honestly, the thought frightens me because my kids are so sweet. I feel like they're so open. They want to talk. They want me to sit next to them and talk to them and be around them. And I don't want to lose that. I feel like I don't know what's going to happen when they become teenagers. I'm like, it's scary to me.
No. So what's great about that is it sounds like, therapeutic words, secure attachment. You built this secure attachment. And so with parents, kids who feel securely attached will push them the hardest. They push them the hardest because they know they won't be abandoned. This is also why siblings might fight. So siblings will fight often, right? Because they don't have to team up to be a safe space for each other against their parents. So as a safe space, for instance, I tell my lover, I always want my bed to be a safe space for my kids. Like if something goes wrong and they want to get in the bed and just cry about it, absolutely. They're always welcome to be in my bed to soothe our bed, to soothe. And that's what your kids will do. They're like, I can't handle this today, mom. But you're also raising independent critical thinkers. So they're going to question and they're going to curious and they're going to be skeptical and they're going to have to find out information on their own and they're going to want to know the whys. Right? That's exactly what we want them to do because one day they're going to parse out a relationship and they're going to need to be skeptical and they're going to need to say, can I trust you? And how do I build up boundaries? And how do I know that you're respecting me and I'm respecting you? Yeah. And all of that work is who we're trying to raise in the world. And that's all sex positive too. We're not trying to raise kids who are going to be sexual assault folks. We're not, right? Nobody's like, yes, I want to raise the next rapist. None of us want to do that.
God, yeah.
Right? But that means we have to teach people how to be responsible with their bodies. Yeah. That means we need to teach people how to say no and how to say yes and what those look like and how they're different. Yeah. Everybody's like, always no means no. I'm like, yes, but how do you teach your child when a yes is a yes?
Yeah. You know what? And that's the biggest thing. I mean, I guess for both my daughter and my son, but for mostly my son, like I was talking to my husband about like, it's important to teach him about consent and like, what does that mean? And I've heard this phrase, enthusiastic consent. And just, trying to help him understand, where the lines are and what he, and how he interacts with whoever, a girl or, whoever he chooses to be with. And, it's so hard because I'm like, okay, like, how do we define, what consent is? And I guess we use other examples of that in life. Did you ask to use my AirPods or did you ask to wear my sweatshirt? Like, how do you make that connection for them so that it makes sense when it can be gray, right?
Oh, absolutely. So my 6-year-old corrected me yesterday on the playground. She just turned 6. I'm super excited. And she is finding her beauty right now. She's like, Mom, I look like Princess Tiana. And I'm like, you do look like Princess Tiana. And we were on a playground. I gave her a kiss and she's like, Mom, you did not ask me if I wanted a kiss right now. I do not want to have affection right now. And I'm like,
okay.
Wow. Right. So like we've been practicing for a long time. And you practice at home. So not only did you wear my sweatshirt, but also, can I sit next to you? Can I hold you? Can I give you a hug? Is that okay? Me and her father also model that. Like, hey babe, like, can I give you a hug? And they see that. And so even now, if like we call our kids hating-ass babies because anytime her and my father like actually want to be like her and her father actually want to be like close, my kids will run up to us if we're hugging and they'll be like, are we sharing affection? Can we all share affection? Like, no, this is between me and your dad.
What is it like? I'm just trying to imagine, what is it like to grow up in a therapist's home? You're giving me some insight into what it's like to grow up with a therapist as a mom.
They're probably annoyed as all hell, honestly. But apparently they use it on their friends. They say, like, you can choose to be happy if you want to be. So
I love it. The most well-adjusted kids. I feel like scientists need to follow your kids for 20 years to see, like, how all this decision making, like how it plays out and how they're, they'll probably follow them right into the White House and doing all these amazing
one day
things.
we'll see, because I mean they also might be in therapy because of us. One day we'll see. I don't know.
I feel like there is no way. I was like, there's no parenting out there, I feel like, that is going to keep your kids out of therapy. Right. Like they probably go regardless of what you do.
Absolutely. So like you're teaching your son those things, right? You're teaching him consent. You're teaching him how to learn trust. You're teaching him how to protect himself, right? So we have to remember that sometimes girls are aggressors, right? And how he can say no, and like that makes me uncomfortable, and who he needs to talk to, and that it's not masculine or unmasculine to be like, no, I don't want this thing from you. It's perfectly normal and human. And he gets to talk to people and be like, I didn't want this thing, and this person keeps trying to force it on me, and that feels uncomfortable. So you asked about consent earlier. There's a thing called FRIES that comes out of Planned Parenthood. I'm not going to get all of these right, but it's like consent is freely given. So it's not coerced. That whole thing, when she says no, you just keep trying. No, you leave her alone. She said no. That was it. She said no, you don't wear her down. That's coercion. And every woman has been in a place where it's easier just to say yes to this thing you don't want and get it over with. Than it is to contend with the person keeping coming at you, right? Enthusiastic was the other part of that, right? And you can look up the acronym. I forgot.
You said FRIES?
Yeah, it's reversible. So consent also can always come off the table. One yes doesn't mean a blanket yes to everything. Right. And also it can also be like, yes, I don't want to do that anymore. No. And that's okay. That's part of consent. It's revocable. And so you go through all of those things, and consent looks different based on who it is. It might not always look enthusiastic. A person might be hesitant, but they want to try it. And they're like, okay, can we go slow? Like, sure, let's go slow. That's still consent, even though it's not like gung ho, yes, I'd love to do that. Because they might not. They'd be like, oh no, we can try it. Right. But we do that. And then also testing out what that affection looks like. So at 11 and 12, affection exchange looks different than 20 and 21, 25, 47, 77, right? So how does he show affection to somebody he cares about in a friendship way and a romance way? What might that look like? Also, what's permitted? Kissing on school grounds can get you suspended. Right. Where can we be safe? Because that's not safe at school. Making out, at basketball practice is going to get you laps. So that's not safe. Right. Where can we be safe? Right. Having a 14-year-old girl go into the boys' locker room is not safe. So we need to encourage safety amongst these other types of affection. People who care about you will also want to keep you safe. Right.
And I think that's the difference between how we, like the way you're describing this and the way I grew up is you're explaining why it is. When I was growing up, it was just do it because I said so. Or just, it was the action, but not the explanation. And so you never really knew why you were doing a certain thing. You just kind of did it because that's what the adult said. And I think, explaining to our kids more, because honestly, I'd rather do it than have them go on the internet and try to figure it out for themselves.
Please don't. Please don't. So you already know the internet is not always the greatest teacher. And I'll tell you that a lot of people, specifically men, the study shows that men who learn about sex through pornography, specifically and explicitly, so meaning most of their stuff that they learn from sex, actually were more likely to commit sexual assault and rape.
Yeah, I believe that. Because I just feel like, I've dated guys who thought pornography, like, it's like, no, it's not real. It's not real. Like, that's not. Yeah.
They're actors. And so that's what you explain to your kids. So let's say, your 12-year-old stumbles across pornography and are like, what? Like, it is exciting to watch. That is what it's designed for. These are actors who are paid to make content that people want to watch. That are specifically for sexual arousal. That's exactly what they're doing. And we're going to talk about who these actors are. Sometimes these actors are poorly paid. And so using like free sites sometimes takes advantage of their labor. So they're actually not making an actual like great living at making this art. They're not making the millions of dollars that Viola Davis is making, right? No, they're not. They're being taken advantage of. Sometimes these people are also underage. So they're being exploited. And that's really important to point out. And that's why we don't like to consume this type of labor, right? It also doesn't show consent or what actual sex really looks like. So you're learning something that actually is quite wrong and a little bit backwards. And I'd rather you not learn it this way.
Yeah. So do you teach your son and your daughter in the exact same way? Like, do you teach them, because I know the thing is, or it used to be where the dad talks to the son and the mom talks to the daughter, and that's how it's done. Like, oh, he has a penis and you have a penis, so y'all need to go in there and talk about this.
Yeah, I think that is the reason why we are in this kerfuffle right now. Because, baby, when you're raising your son, who do you want your son to be? Do you want your son to be the kid who points out the girl who bled through her pants and laughs at her? Or do you want your son to be the kid who's like, hey, you bled through your pants, I wrapped the jacket around your waist? Who are you raising?
Yeah.
Does your husband know about menstruation? Where he can walk your son through, this is the shedding of a uterine lining because there was an ova that went through the fallopian tube that actually didn't turn into a fetus because there was no sperm present. Right? If your husband can't do that, your husband can't be the sole person who gives your son sex education.
Yeah.
They don't know enough. If the other person, and like, if you don't know enough about a penis, like this is smegma, this is scrotal, you need to test your you need to check your testes for, any type of contusions, any type of lumps, bumps every month because testicular cancer is real, then you're not the person who can be the sole educator of your son.
Right.
There needs to be a dual effort. And so some people don't have penises in the house. Some people don't have vulvas in the house. But you need to find a community of other parents who have the same values that will also have information. But no, I think the whole like gendered sexuality, it's crap. Stop doing it. All people need to know about menstruation, especially because these are the people that are going to vote on the rights of your body. You're raising people who are voting on the rights of other people's bodies, and they know nothing about them. If they don't know that you have like 2 ovaries and 2 fallopian tubes, how are they going to vote? Like, I don't understand.
That's why they think it's okay for a dead fetus to live in your body.
Yes,
until you pass it. That's why we have those
we're
kind
trying
of rules.
to replace ectopic pregnancies in the uterus because that's how that works. It's not how that works.
No. Oh my gosh.
Right? So these are the people that you're raising. Again, these citizens that you're raising. And I ask who you're raising. When your daughter sees a random erection from a boy who's going through puberty, is she gonna point that out and be like, ew, you so disgusting, and shame that kid for something that they can't control? Or is she gonna be like, hey, yo, cover up, dude? Like, because they don't know what's happening half the time, right? It's not something that's necessarily purposeful at that age.
Right.
It's like, yo, you out here, bro? Like, cover it up. And move about her day. And I'll give you the quick story. So like my at the time she was 5, maybe 4. She was 4 going on 5, and she knows about penises. She knows penises exist in the world, right? And a kid in the bathroom like exposed himself, like playing around. And she looked at the kid. She was like, "Put your penis away. That is not what we're supposed to be doing right now." And it was annoyed, right? She later did not invite the kid to her birthday party because he's rude.
Well, I wouldn't either.
But the girl next to her was really bothered. She's like, "Oh my God, what is that? How come he has one of those? What's going on?" And she was like really flustered. And it was because she was flustered. My daughter was like, "Stop, put your penis away." But like my daughter was just like, yeah, and such had his penis out in the bathroom, and I had to go tell the teacher because he wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing. He's supposed to be washing his hands.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
I need your daughter to come on here and teach me.
I was like, so do you want me to do anything about that? She was like, well, don't invite him to my birthday party because he's rude. And I was like, okay, you don't have to come to your birthday party. Anything else? And I followed up with her teacher, and she was like, yeah, and they actually redid their entire bathroom methodology after that. But my kid wasn't harmed or scarred by this, right? It's not a core memory for her that she's going to look back and it be so negative. She doesn't even remember it happened at this point. And she's 6 now. Because she knew what a penis looked like, and she knew that some people have penises and some people don't. And that was as simple as it was. So the question is, who are you raising?
Yeah.
And who do you want them to be?
It sounds like when I'm listening to you talk and I'm like, wow, if every kid were like this, I'm like, what kind of utopia could we live in? Like, so much of how you move through the world is a defense mechanism. How you walk out, how you go to your car, I mean, at least as a woman, right? At least as a woman, you're trying to protect yourself and thinking about all the things. And I think about how vigilant I am with my daughter, because I'm like, I mean, my son too, but he's older, she's younger, but I'm always like, don't let her go to the bathroom by herself. Yeah. She cannot. She asked me on Saturday, we were at the movie. She was like, when are you gonna let me go to the bathroom by myself? I'm like, it's not 11. It's not 11 for sure. I was like, let's go. I mean, I gotta miss part of the movie, but that's just a part of it. But the way we move through the world, like, I don't think most men understand how that weighs on women to have to move through the world and like have to constantly be vigilant about protecting yourself. Yep. It is, and it's obviously starts in childhood with these conversations,
because we're calling 5-year-old little Black girls fast.
Yeah,
and she just want my man. She's 5, ma'am. Why are we competing?
I will fight you. Who said that?
I will fight you in this kitchen.
Oh my God.
All day and half the night. I will fight you in this kitchen. Please know that my degree is newer than my hands. I will know all of therapist Lexx will be out this window. Right. But I will say, like, the adultification still happens to young men and boys, right? And we definitely know that men are typically the sexual predators, right? The world anticipates about 4 to 6% of the world's population of men are actually attracted to children. Right.
What?
So we know that.
Wait,
4 to 6%. 4 to 6% of the population of men in the world are attracted to children.
But why is it? Because
we don't know why. We don't know how attractions work, right? Like,
okay.
Also, I'm going to say, nobody wakes up Sunday morning and is like, today I'm going to be attracted to children.
Right.
It's nobody chooses this thing. There is some mental stuff that happens. There's some brain stuff that happens that's a little bit misaligned. Yes. And we know that from studies. We also know that not necessarily all people who are attracted to children are offenders of children, because sexual predators and sexual offenders are actually different than people who are sexually attracted. And a recent study came out that says that people who actually offend against children, I think less than 4% of those were actually sexual predators.
Okay, what's the difference between an offend? Oh,
not a predator. We're actually people attracted to children.
Okay.
Right. So people who are offending against young people and children are typically men who are looking for power and control. They might not be people who identify as being sexually attracted to children. Right. It's who they could take advantage of. They had the opportunity to take advantage of somebody weaker or smaller than them, and they did.
Right.
But they weren't necessarily wanting to, like, romance, be in a relationship with that child. It's a power thing. It's not always an attraction thing. And you have to remember that 60-year-old dirty A-shirt wearing person on the news that we see when we think of, like, sexual predator against children was also 16 at one time and still attracted to children, was 14 at one time and still attracted to children, was 20 at one time and still attracted to children, right? And had nowhere to get help.
Okay.
Less than 10% of counselors and therapists work with people attracted to children. Less than 10%. I think that the rate is like 8.2.
Right.
So where do they go to get help before they commit a crime?
Yeah.
But we have parents who hide them, right? They hide them.
Oh, yeah.
Don't tell anybody this. Or we have families who hide them. Everybody know you can't go sit on Uncle Mark's lap.
Right.
But didn't nobody get Uncle Mark help? Uncle Mark has harmed how many cousins?
Yeah.
But nobody was like, Uncle Mark needs some help because of shame. Meanwhile, we could have helped Uncle Mark years ago. We could have found a program. We could have found a therapist. We could have found somewhere for Uncle Mark to be so Uncle Mark would not harm anybody else.
Yeah. That takes me back to what you were saying about secrets and how teaching your kids about how secrets aren't good and
they don't feel good. They don't feel good. And you're teaching your daughter to be protective, which is necessary in our society, right? Because people harm women and children regularly. People do harm boy children as well. And that happens. And so men typically don't think about how not to get raped when they leave the house.
Right.
But you can ask your husband, what do you do every day to make sure you don't get raped?
I'm going to ask him when he gets home.
Right. And he's going to be like, nothing. Meanwhile, we know how to like put our keys between our knuckles and not have our hair in a certain way, and to be vigilant around all of our surroundings, and 45 seconds when you get in the car between you pulling off, right? So we have all of these things. And so letting your son know that these are all of the protections that take place is also going to help open up his worldview. One, to help keep him safe, but two, to also make sure that when he's with other people, they're going to feel safe.
Yeah. This is when my husband listens to this, it's going to be a revelation to him, because we're just very different people. And he about to be 50, and he has and I'm always, as the world evolves, he is trying to evolve. He's doing his best to evolve and not use words like soft and like, I'm always like, don't say that. You got to say this. You got to say it in this way. How do parents who are different, like when I've talked to my kids about sex, when we've tried to have conversations about sex, it always starts off fairly well. And then all of a sudden we just down on this tangent about what happened when I was little and the girl, and they gonna try to trap you. Like, it's like, how do we even get here? Like, we way past where we need to be. How do parents get on the same page about what needs to be taught to kids?
Well, one, there's some trauma there that needs to be resolved. Right? Being trapped is scary. Having a pregnancy scare when you're like, and it's an unintentional pregnancy, we always think about the person who's carrying the pregnancy, never the person that pregnancies can be pinned on and be used. Like, men are more than ATMs and banks.
Yeah.
And I will say the first victims of patriarchy are boys, because they're taught to castrate their feelings. Right? Yeah. So like, babe, that must have been so scary for you. Is the fear what we're trying to pass on to our son? And how do we parent him from wisdom versus parenting him from fear?
Right.
What does that look like? Right. So wisdom means you always have a barrier method and you rely on your barrier method, not her barrier method. That means you don't put fluids in places they don't need to be.
Right. Why? Can you explain why fear? I think people think fear works, right? I think, I work in marketing, and one of the things that obviously we develop our ads around is fear, fear-based ads, because it gets people to act. But can you explain why fear doesn't work? Because I think people think it does, but ultimately, why doesn't it?
Yeah. So fear doesn't work, one, because it's not a sustainable feeling, right? Our bodies get flooded with adrenaline. We figure something out so we can remove ourselves from whatever was scary. And then two, once we learn more, that fear becomes moot. So if you remember this is your penis with warts slideshow that they used to show, like, if you have sex, you're going to get a venereal disease and die.
Yeah.
That was the whole thing.
This is syphilis. This is
right.
This is what it looks like.
Exactly. We know that doesn't work. One, because you'll see people and that's not what their bodies look like. Those are the most extreme cases. So now I'm seeing people and I don't see a penis that looks like that. This person doesn't have genital warts. And then you end up with genital warts and you're like, oh, okay, well, that didn't work.
Well,
right? Because people try it, test it, and find it not to be true. And everybody's fear points are a little bit different. Yeah. So a person could be scared of spiders. Another person's like, I ain't scared of spiders, but I'm scared of heights.
Yeah.
So there isn't a one key that fits all of that. So it doesn't work. It doesn't stick. And again, once specifically teenagers start to investigate, because that skepticism comes real heavy,
right,
and find out that you're lying and you're not telling the truth. Now they're like, well, game recognized game, and you looking unfamiliar because I know you lie. So what else are you lying to me about? And now I need to go consult Google or consult my friends who are cooler than you, who know more than you, mom and dad, who are then it becomes just like a ring of nonsense, because now we're having people use earwax to try and test if somebody has an STI. I'm like, who?
What?
Yes, they dig in their ears.
And then what they do?
If you put your earwax inside of somebody's vagina and it sizzles, then they have an STI.
What?
I don't know why that's supposed to work.
Who came up with that? Okay.
This
is why that frontal lobe thing you were talking about. This is why I'm concerned.
Who's letting you put earwax? No. First of all, how much earwax are you purposely letting go in your ears so you can dig it out?
And why is it sizzling? Like what? What is this? I'm sorry.
Right? So like lots of questions. Then we also have people who sit through painful intercourse. And when my children are ready to have sex, I don't want it to be painful and suffering.
Right.
And I don't want them to have other people in pain or suffering.
Yeah.
Right. And people don't like to think about their kids having sex one day, and they will. They will have sex one day. And it is up to us to let them know that it's not supposed to be something that's painful and horrible. And also we have some parents on this podcast that listen to you whose children have already had sexual experiences that were unwanted, and will need to learn that it can actually be something that is consensual and pleasurable and boundaried, where you are listened to and you are cherished.
Yeah.
Right? There's healing that comes from that, because perpetrators don't get to control pleasure. And our Black bodies don't necessarily get enough of that. Again, raised Black Baptist in the South. I was told to be seen and not heard.
Yeah.
Right? To have your voice muted. If you laugh too loud, you're inappropriate. If you talk too loud, you're inappropriate. If your hair's too big or too long or too kinky, it's wrong. Right? And it needs to be tamed. And so we have all of these ways that our bodies are taught not to receive pleasure. Yeah. And we get to take that back. That's part of sex positive parenting. Your kids' bodies deserve pleasure. Again, it doesn't have to be sexual pleasure. But it deserves to be pleasure. They get to be kids and to laugh and to be boisterous and to be loud and to have messy hair and to exist and to be outside and let sun be on their skin without worrying about them getting too dark and being unlovable.
Right.
All of those things go into being a sex positive parent.
Man, if I had had this conversation before I had kids, I don't know if I would have kids. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot to think about, to raise well-adjusted kids. And I'm like, ooh, the conversations. So what words, can you just leave us with some words of encouragement?
Ooh,
encouragement. Where should we go? What should we do? How do we prepare ourselves to better have these conversations?
Okay. So one, you are not parenting alone. Find your community. It doesn't have to be all you all the time. That is a really colonist perspective. We're a collectivistic people. Two, self-sacrifice never equals goodness, which is something I say often. So you sacrificing yourself, you teaching your kids to sacrifice themselves, it doesn't make them better. It doesn't make them better kids, as sons, daughters, humans. It doesn't make them better workers or students. It diminishes them, and they're whole people too. And then three, work on your ish. Whatever your ish is as the parent. Are you parenting from fear because you're still healing from your trauma? Yeah. And is that what you want to pass on? Yeah. Right. How does it serve you? And is it useful? And I'm guessing the answer is probably no, because that's what I see in my therapy room for over a decade of doing therapy. Right. Fear doesn't really serve for living the life that you want them to thrive. Yeah. So work on your ish. So those are my three things, right? So
thank you. Is it possible to work on your ish and parent? Can you do both at the same time, or does one have to?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. No, you work on them both at the same time, because here's the thing. You're going to be honest and upfront with your kid. You're saying, hey, I'm still working on my ish. This is really hard for me. Or I am not the person you need to talk to about this. I haven't worked through all my stuff yet. But here is TT Lexx. Here is your dad. Here is Auntie Margot. Whoever it is, they're going to be better suited, and I trust you to talk to them. Do you want me to set up the call?
There's a level of vulnerability that you're not used to, like in this type of parenting has, that you're just not used to as a parent, because you're used to having all the answers and
Yeah, why? No, you're a human. And I think that's something that kids forget, is that we're human too. And that's something I've been working with my kids recently. I'm like, mom's human too. Mom's leaving. I love you. I'm not just your mother. I'm a whole human. I will see you after volleyball. I will see you after my friend date, because mom has a life too. So yeah, so you're a human too as a parent. Again, self-sacrifice doesn't equal goodness. You sacrificing yourself doesn't make you a better parent.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Dr. Lexx. This has been a great conversation. There was a lot, okay?
It was a lot.
People getting a lot. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And little baby boy, he was so quiet and cute the whole time. Is he asleep?
Yes, milk drunk. Asleep?
Okay, that's the best life. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you sharing all of your knowledge, all of your experience. I really appreciate it. It's a great conversation. So.
I can't wait. I can't wait to hear all the things. And please let me know what else you need from me. I'm so happy.
Thank you so much. And for everybody else, I will see you next time.
Bye.